300 million years ago, before dinosaurs ever walked the Earth, our planet was ruled by giant insects straight out of a nightmare. In the Carboniferous swamps, dragonflies the size of hawks, armored roaches built like tanks, and predators with saw-blade legs and vampire-like mouths turned the skies and forests into killing grounds. This was an alien world where even a simple leaf might hide a predator. And survival meant facing monsters with wings, claws, and jaws unlike anything alive today. Meganeura, the giant dragonfly that hunted like a raptor. The skies were not safe in the thick, swampy woods of the Carboniferous period, where huge plants and tall horsetails made walls of green. Meganeura, a relative of dragonflies with wings that are almost 3 feet across, flew high above the thick greenery. It was the clear king of the air, a huge bug that was about the same size as a contemporary crow. The Meganeura had teeth that were sharp enough to cut through skin, unlike the soft dragonflies we see today. It also hunted like a bird of prey, rather than a bug. The Carboniferous atmosphere played a key role in creating this monster. Oxygen levels were around 35% compared to today's 21%, making the air richer and denser. For insects, which breathed through tiny tubes called trachea, this abundance of oxygen allowed their bodies to grow to sizes impossible in the modern world. Meganeura thrived in this environment, using its enormous wingspan to glide with ease through the humid air. Fossilized wing impressions found in France and England confirm just how massive this creature was. Its wings were reinforced with strong veins, giving it stability during sudden dives and mid-air grappling. Meganeura was very menacing because it had many tools for hunting. It had huge, complex eyes that let it see almost everything around it. Each eye had thousands of tiny lenses that could pick up on even the smallest movement. Dragonflies today are very good at hunting in the air. They can catch their food in the air 95% of the time. But Meganeura took this skill to a whole new level. Once it locked onto a target, its wings let it move quickly, and its spiny legs made a trap that looked like a cage. If it wanted to eat something, it would trap its prey in this prison of arms. Then it would pull the prey into its crushing teeth. The mandibles of Meganeura were serrated and blade-like, ideal for slicing through exoskeletons and tearing flesh. This meant it wasn't restricted to soft-bodied insects, but could also chew through armored prey. Some paleontologists speculate that Meganeura may have been opportunistic, swooping down on struggling animals near the swamp's surface, or scavenging weakened victims. Fossil evidence shows that large insect predators of the time filled many of the roles that birds and bats would later dominate. In the Carboniferous skies, Meganeura was effectively the hawk, the vulture, and the ambush raptor all rolled into one. Its dominance was not only about size and weapons. The Carboniferous forests were teeming with insects of every shape and form, millipedes the length of cars, giant cockroaches and other primitive flyers. This abundance of prey meant Meganeura had an endless supply of meals. Its hunting behavior likely mirrored modern odonats, patrolling territories, waiting in ambush, and even competing with rivals. Scientists believe its wings were not just tools of flight, but also displays of intimidation. A sudden flare of a 3-foot wingspan could easily scare off smaller competitors. Despite its fearsome presence, Meganeura also lived in a dangerous world. Amphibians were growing larger and more diverse, some reaching sizes big enough to prey on insects. Early reptiles were beginning to creep into the forests, yet the skies largely belonged to Meganeura, and very few predators could challenge it in its element. Its only true limitations may have come from weather. Fossil reconstructions suggest its wings, while powerful, may have struggled in heavy rainfall or stormy winds common to swampy environments. Like modern dragonflies, it may have needed to perch and wait out storms, vulnerable during those moments. The mystery of Meganeura extends to why such giants eventually disappeared. As the Carboniferous gave way to the Permian period, oxygen levels dropped. Larger insects could no longer sustain their massive bodies with shrinking oxygen availability. Birds and other vertebrate flyers later rose to fill the skies, leaving giants like Meganeura as relics of a time when bugs were kings. When you think about walking through those old forests, you can picture a world where danger could fall from the sky at any time. The buzzing of wings wouldn't be the harmless hum we hear today. Instead, it would be the warning of a coming bird of prey bigger than your wrist that could kill with the accuracy of a hawk. Meganeura was a living nightmare for the small animals of the Carboniferous. Mazotheiros, the four-winged juggernaut with spiked legs. Meganeura ruled the skies like a hawk, and Mazotheiros was like the Carboniferous's air tank. This huge Paleodictyopteran, found in ancient beds in what is now Europe, took insect design to a whole new level. Mazotheiros had four wings, grouped in a way that made it look almost automatic. Modern dragonflies and butterflies only have two pairs of wings. Although its wings were not as thin as lace, they were strong, had lots of veins, and were made to handle a lot of stress. If you had seen it fly, it would have looked like a huge buzzing machine cutting through the damp air of Carboniferous swamps. The wingspan of Mazotheiros exceeded 2 feet, placing it among the largest insects of its time. But it was not only size that set it apart, it was the strange venation patterns that paleontologists puzzle over today. Unlike dragonflies, whose wings are sleek and aerodynamic, Mazotheiros had irregular net-like veins running in crisscrossing lattices. These patterns suggest a combination of strength and flexibility, preventing the wings from tearing during sudden dives or struggles with prey. Some researchers propose that the insect could flap each pair of wings independently, giving it unmatched maneuverability for something so large. Its body was equally imposing. Fossils reveal thick exoskeletal plating, suggesting that Mazotheiros was armored against both attackers and prey that fought back. Its legs, unlike the spindly limbs of other aerial hunters, were lined with spines. These spines were not ornamental, they likely acted as grappling hooks. When Mazotheiros slammed into prey, its limbs could lock tight, digging in to prevent escape. This meant that even large or thrashing prey would find it nearly impossible to wriggle free once caught. The Carboniferous forests were full of soft-bodied insects, juvenile amphibians, and even early reptiles, perfect targets for a predator of Mazotheiros's size. While modern-day mantises use their forelimbs to trap prey, Mazotheiros may have employed its entire body as a weapon. A sudden mid-air strike followed by a crushing embrace of spiny legs would have immobilized victims long enough for its serrated jaws to get to work. Those jaws preserved in fossils appear saw-like, designed not for sipping nectar or piercing plant matter, but for slicing and grinding flesh. This places Mazotheiros firmly among the top insect predators of its time. Its appearance alone may have been intimidating enough to keep rivals away. With 4 massive wings, spiked legs, and a ridged body, it would have looked more like a piece of prehistoric machinery than a living animal. In fact, some paleontologists have compared its look to a flying tank, a rare example of natural selection pushing an insect toward both offensive and defensive extremes. While dragonflies embody sleek efficiency, Mazotheiros embodied brute force. Yet, questions linger about its exact role in the ecosystem. Paleodictyopterans are a group of extinct insects that show a mixture of traits, many not found in any modern species. Some were herbivores, others predators, and some may have been opportunists feeding on decaying matter. The adaptations of Mazotheiros suggest it leaned heavily toward predation, but some scientists argue it may have also scavenged. Its strong jaws could have torn into dead carcasses as easily as it did living prey. In an ecosystem as rich as the Carboniferous swamp, such versatility would have been advantageous. Because Mazotheiros is an example of evolution, it shows how insects tried flying long before birds or bats did. Because of the way its wings are built, it looks like ancient insects were trying aerodynamic techniques on a level that current insects can't. The gigantism was helped by oxygen-rich air and the lack of competition from vertebrates. Since there were no birds to fight them, insects like Mazotheiros were free to rule the skies and get bigger and weird than any of their offspring would ever be. Still, being large came with trade-offs. Such heavy bodies and thick wings likely required enormous energy to keep aloft. Mesotheros may have relied on ambush tactics, waiting motionless on a branch until prey passed within striking distance, then bursting into a sudden sprint of flight to secure a kill. Extended chases would have been costly, leaving the insect vulnerable if prey escaped. Its hunting strategy may have been built around efficiency, fast, brutal strikes that left little chance for its victim. Although Mesotheros and many of the other Carboniferous giants are no longer known, its fossils show us a nerve-wracking picture of what insects used to be like. It wasn't the delicate buzzing of summer bugs. It was the loud beating of armored wings, followed by the snap of spiked legs and the grind of teeth. Stephanotypus, the dragonfly doppelganger with hooked claws. To begin with, Stephanotypus seems very much like Meganeura, its more well-known cousin. Both were huge insects that looked like dragonflies and lived in the Carboniferous period. They flew through fernwoods and reed swamps like they were hunting. But while Meganeura was strong because it was big and fast, Stephanotypus was scary because it had features that made it stand out, like hooked claws that made it better at killing than any living thing today. The wings of Stephanotypus were vast and powerful, similar to those of Meganeura, and it likely spanned well over 2 feet. Like other early odonates, it belonged to the Protodonata group, a lineage that paved the way for the dragonflies of today. But Stephanotypus didn't just imitate Meganeura's role in the ecosystem. It filled a different niche. Instead of patrolling the skies and ambushing prey in mid-air, Stephanotypus seems to have specialized in striking from the edges of plants, where its claws could be put to gruesome use. Its claws were not delicate graspers. Fossil evidence shows that the forelimbs of Stephanotypus were lined with hooks and ridges, suggesting they were designed to latch onto prey like grappling tools. Imagine a creature hiding among branches, waiting until an unsuspecting insect crawled by, and then snapping down with barbed limbs that locked tight. Unlike Meganeura, which used its spiny legs as a net in the air, Stephanotypus had the perfect toolkit for ambush hunting on vegetation. Once caught, the prey would face the full force of Stephanotypus's jaws. These mandibles were less blade-like than Meganeura's, but still formidable, capable of tearing apart soft-bodied insects and chewing through armored exoskeletons. Combined with the claws, this meant Stephanotypus could pin victims against leaves or bark and methodically dismantle them. Some paleontologists compare this behavior to modern praying mantises, which seize prey with spiked forelimbs before consuming them alive. In a sense, Stephanotypus may have been the Carboniferous mantis long before mantises ever existed. The size of its food may have also changed its natural role. Meganeura might have gone after frogs or snakes that lived on the ground in the forest, but Stephanotypus might have been better at going after smaller, more common animals. In the Carboniferous period, there were a lot of cockroaches, mayfly relatives, and early birds of prey in the canopy and understory. Because it has claws, Stephanotypus could grab these animals right from where they were hidden. This would have been a nightmare for any bug trying to hide in the leaves. The design of its claws raises another possibility: competition. In a world where the skies swarmed with large predators, niches were fiercely contested. By evolving hooked forelimbs, Stephanotypus may have avoided direct competition with Meganeura, carving out its own method of survival. Instead of burning energy chasing prey through the air, it could lurk motionless and strike only when victory was assured. This efficiency may have allowed it to thrive in areas where Meganeura's more energy-intensive strategy would not. The fossils of Stephanotypus are rare, and much about its exact behavior remains speculative. Still, what little we know paints the picture of a predator with patience and precision. It didn't need to intimidate with sheer size alone. Its hunting relied on timing, stealth, and unshakable grip. To its prey, this meant that once those hooked claws locked in, escape was impossible. Remember that these Carboniferous giants lived in a world that was very different from ours. Insects were able to do almost any kind of hunting because they lived in thick jungles with lots of big plants, high oxygen levels, and no vertebrate flyers to fight with them. Stephanotypus shows us how different these tactics could be, with one bug being very fast and good at flying, and another being very good at sneaking up on its prey with its claws. Sinui jumantispa, the praying mantid of prehistory. The Carboniferous swamps were home to an insect that was trying out the same dangerous design long before real mantises got their famous raptorial arms. That animal was Sinui jumantispa, a strange hunter whose front legs were not just legs for moving but highly specialized weapons. Fossils show that these arms could bend and fold like knives on hinges. They had spines inside them that could snap shut around their food with scary accuracy. If you were a small bug living in the Carboniferous, Sinui jumantispa would have been the embodiment of quick death, a predator that could kill in an instant. This bug was easy to recognize because its front legs could grab things. Sinui jumantispa's legs worked like those of a modern praying mantis, though they were not exactly the same shape. Meganeura's legs were net-like, and Stephanotypus's claws were hooked. They pressed flat against the body when folded, making the bug look innocent or even like it was hiding. In an instant, though, the arms could snap forward and pin the food against a surface that had rows of spines deep into it. It would have been very hard to get away once they were caught. This type of predation is called ambush hunting, and it's among the most energy-efficient strategies in nature. Sinui jumantispa didn't need to chase its targets through the air like Meganeura. Instead, it could wait motionless on a stem, fern frond, or tree trunk, letting the flow of insects come to it. In an ecosystem bursting with cockroaches, mayfly-like creatures, and juvenile orthopterans, patience paid off. A passing bug that ventured too close would be seized instantly, pulled towards serrated jaws, and consumed alive. Its body plan hints that it wasn't built for long-distance pursuit. Compared to sleek dragonfly relatives, Sinui jumantispa likely had slower, more deliberate flight, using its wings mainly to reposition itself rather than for extended patrols. This further supports the ambush theory. Think of it less as a soaring raptor and more as a lurking assassin, striking only when the odds were in its favor. The Carboniferous environment gave this insect plenty of opportunities. Dense swamps with towering vegetation created countless perching sites, shadowy hideouts, and corridors for prey to stumble into. High oxygen levels and a booming diversity of arthropods meant food was everywhere. But this abundance also meant competition. By evolving mantis-like arms, Sinui jumantispa avoided clashing directly with aerial giants like Meganeura. Instead, it specialized in vertical hunting grounds, the stalks and leaves that made up the forest walls. What is unique about Sinui jumantispa is that it predicted evolutionary patterns that would show up much later. Before the Jurassic, about 100 million years after this bug lived, true mantises didn't appear. But this Carboniferous hunter was already using the same moves: raptorial arms folded in, lightning-fast hits, and spiny traps. Sinui jumantispa is one of the best examples of this convergent design because it shows up in later lines after being tried out by evolution. Its lifestyle may also have included cannibalism or combat. Modern mantises are infamous for fighting and sometimes eating one another, and the hooked, spiny limbs of Sinui jumantispa could just as easily have been used in territorial disputes as in hunting. Imagine two of these insects perched on the same tree, forelimbs snapping out not at prey, but at each other, spines interlocking in a brutal wrestling match. The Carboniferous world was crowded, and survival often meant fighting your own kind as much as anything else. For smaller creatures, the presence of Sinui jumantispa turned every plant surface into a potential trap. Unlike Meganeura's loud approach, this insect was silent until the moment of the strike. Its victims would never know they were in danger until it was too late. To us, it might look like a strange fusion of mantis and dragonfly, but to the insects of the swamps, it was simply death waiting on a stem. Bohemia tupus, the spiny wasp of the swamps. A bug called Bohemia tupus carried its weapons on its back deep in the Carboniferous swamps. Bohemia tupus had a different kind of armor than Meganeura, which had wings, or Sinuijumantispa, which had forelimbs that could be used as wings. Its body was covered with sharp spines. Fossil impressions show a creature whose stomach was full of weapons for defense, making it look like a nightmare full of thorns. It would be full of needles if an attacker or a foe tried to touch it. The Carboniferous was an age of experimentation in insect design, and Bohemia tupus was a masterclass in defensive adaptation. Its spiny armor may have had multiple functions. First and most obvious, the spines would have discouraged attackers. Amphibians prowling the swamps, as well as other predatory insects, could swallow soft-bodied prey with ease, but tackling Bohemia tupus meant risking a throatful of spikes. Even if the predator succeeded, it may not have survived the aftermath. The painful reminder would have given Bohemia tupus a survival edge in an ecosystem full of danger. But the spines may not have been purely defensive. Some paleontologists speculate they played a role in reproduction or egg-laying. Modern wasps, to which Bohemia tupus bears a passing resemblance, often drill or cut into wood, bark or soil to deposit eggs. The spiny abdomen of Bohemia tupus could have helped it dig into decaying logs or rotting vegetation, securing its offspring in nutrient-rich, protective environments. If true, these spikes would have served as both shield and tool, doubling the insect's evolutionary value. Its overall body structure also tells a story. Bohemia tupus wasn't as massive as Meganeura or Mazathyros, but it didn't need to be. Its size fell in a range large enough to intimidate smaller insects, but small enough to move nimbly among the swamp foliage. Its wings were functional, but not built for soaring dominance. Instead, it likely darted short distances, moving between cover and exploiting niches, where stealth and armor mattered more than raw speed. The really frightening thing about Bohemia tupus is how it probably acts when it's in groups. Insects that lived in the Carboniferous era often did well in large groups. If there were a lot of Bohemia tupus, whole areas of swamp would have been impossible for predators to get to. There would have been a wall of needles made by a group of busy, spiny insects protecting eggs, territory, and food sources. Imagine walking through a thicket of plants and stirring up a swarm of them, each one with a sharp defense. In a world without birds or animals to keep numbers in check, these swarms could have been too much to handle. There's also evidence that some Carboniferous insects engaged in mimicry, disguising themselves as more dangerous or unpalatable species. Bohemia tupus may have been one of the originals in this evolutionary arms race. The bright wings of some fossil relatives suggest that coloration could have paired with its spiny body, warning predators in advance. Touch me and regret it. This echoes the strategy of modern wasps and caterpillars, which use both coloration and spines to deter predators. Yet, as terrifying as Bohemia tupus's defenses were, they also made it a symbol of the fragile balance of its time. Its spikes worked in a world of amphibians, reptiles, and giant insects. But as ecosystems shifted, such extreme specialization may have become a burden. By the Permian period, when oxygen levels dropped and new predators evolved, creatures like Bohemia tupus vanished from the fossil record, leaving behind only their thorny silhouettes in stone. Permiralia, the serrated-mouthed predator with folded wings. In the thick shadows of the Carboniferous swamps, where tangled roots and tall plants made it easy to hide, there lived an insect that was not like the big flyers that lived in the open air. While Meganeura was made to fly high above the sky, Permiralia was not. Neither was Bohemia tupus, whose armor was made to scare off enemies with its jagged edges. Instead, it was a hunter that lived in the bushes and was very good at sneaking up on its prey. Its most powerful tool was its mouth, which had saw-like serrated jaws that could quickly and easily cut through food. The mouthparts of Permiralia set it apart from most other insects of its era. Fossils suggest elongated ridged mandibles with tooth-like edges, not just for cutting plants but for slicing through the soft bodies of other arthropods. In a world where many insects were large and heavily armored, Permiralia specialized in targeting the weak spots: joints, membranes, and underbellies. Once it sank its jaws in, escape would have been impossible. Its feeding likely involved both cutting and pulling, breaking prey down into manageable pieces. Its wings told a different story than those of the aerial giants. Rather than being broad and extended for long flights, Permuralia's wings folded neatly along its body, making it compact and maneuverable in tight spaces. This adaptation suggests it was not a long-distance hunter, but a crawler, slipping into bark crevices, rotting logs, and other confined environments. Like a modern cockroach squeezing into impossible gaps, Permuralia used its body shape to hunt where others could not follow. The Carboniferous ecosystem made this strategy incredibly effective. Decaying plant matter piled thick on swamp floors, attracting swarms of burrowing insects, worms, and early arthropods. These hidden worlds were bustling with life, but also dangerous. A perfect environment for a predator that could move silently and strike in confined quarters. Permuralia thrived here, feasting on creatures that believed themselves safe in the dark recesses of wood and soil. Its ambush style may have resembled that of modern assassin bugs or ground beetles. By remaining motionless in cracks or under bark, it could wait until a smaller insect passed by, then launch a sudden attack, pinning the victim with its legs and tearing into it with serrated jaws. Unlike the swooping strikes of Meganeura, this was a close-quarters kill, messy and inescapable. The tight environment worked in Permuralia's favor, preventing prey from escaping into open air. The folded wings also offered another advantage: protection. Insects with exposed wings risked damage in the dense undergrowth, but Permuralia's compact design kept them safe from snags and tears. This made it a resilient hunter, able to move between forest floor, rotting vegetation, and even low branches without compromising its flight ability when needed. It could still escape danger by flying short bursts, but its design clearly favored crawling ambush over soaring patrols. What made Permuralia nightmarish was not only its weaponry, but also its invisibility. Imagine walking through a carboniferous swamp as a small creature, the floor alive with insects, shadows thick with movement. You might feel safe in the grooves of a tree or the hollow of a log, only to find those spaces already occupied by this serrated-mouthed predator. Unlike the visible threat of a 3-foot dragonfly overhead, Permuralia was the horror you didn't see until it was too late. There is some evidence that insects like Permuralia may have had an impact on how other animals in its environment behaved. Predators like this one may have made them dig deeper, make their armor stronger, or even start sleeping at night as a way to stay alive. In this way, Permuralia wasn't just a predator, it was also a force for evolution that pushed smaller species to change or die. Namarotypus, the night hunter with needle jaws. Namarotypus was like the shade that ruled the night, while Meganeura was like the hawk that ruled the day. It lived in the late Carboniferous and was a protodonatan bug. It scared people in swamp woods in a different way. It wasn't its huge size or the brute force of its sharp teeth or clawed legs that scared people. On the other hand, Namarotypus carried a more subtle weapon, a long, needle-shaped proboscis. This animal could use it to stab soft-bodied prey and drain them in the dark, like a vampire killer who works in the bushes. The Namarotypus's mouth was what made it distinctive. Fossils show teeth that are long and needle-like, designed for puncturing. The Permuralia had mandibles with saw-edged edges, but these were thin and sharp, making them perfect for cutting soft tissue. Once the mouths were in place, they may have worked like straws to drain the victim's body fluids. This is a way that mosquitoes and assassin bugs eat today, but Namarotypus did it on a much bigger and more dangerous scale. Its bite would have killed small bugs or larvae right away. Its role as a nocturnal hunter is suggested by the dense forest environment it inhabited. The Carboniferous canopy blocked much of the sunlight, plunging the swamp floor into shadows. Many creatures relied on stillness or camouflage for protection, but Namarotypus was perfectly adapted to hunt in the gloom. Its compound eyes, though smaller than Meganeura's, were likely tuned for low light, detecting faint movements even in near darkness. Combined with silent, controlled wing beats, this made it a stealth predator able to close in without warning. Namurotypus didn't need to overpower its prey with brute strength. Its long, piercing jaws allowed it to exploit niches ignored by other predators. Soft-bodied insects like early mayflies, juvenile orthopterans, or freshly molted bugs would have been its primary targets. Even amphibian larvae or small worms hiding in damp soil might have fallen victim. Once pinned, the needle jaws would pierce through, and in moments the prey would be reduced to a hollow husk. Its hunting style likely blurred the line between aerial pursuit and ground stalking. With its wings, Namurotypus could fly short distances, but fossils suggest it was not a long-distance flyer like Meganeura. Instead, it may have glided from perch to perch, striking at ground-level prey or plucking insects off leaves and branches. In this sense, it was a transitional predator, equally comfortable in the air and on the forest floor. This versatility made it especially dangerous. Nowhere in the swamp was entirely safe. The ecological role of Namurotypus may have helped regulate populations of softer-bodied species. In an environment where giant cockroaches, millipedes, and dragonfly-like predators thrived, there was still room for specialized hunters. By targeting creatures that other predators ignored or couldn't efficiently kill, Namurotypus filled an evolutionary gap. This is why paleontologists often view it as an early experiment in proboscis predation, a strategy later perfected by countless insect groups across history. It would have made the Carboniferous night even more frightening by being there. At dusk, when the air was cooler and fog rose among the trees, picture the swamp. Namurotypus came to life while the giant flyers settled down and the armored beetle-like insects moved away. It hung there in the dark for a moment, then shot forward, its jaws flashing in the dark. It bit people quickly, and their armor wasn't strong enough to stop its sharp bite. Namurotypus was a death needle waiting in the dark for anything with a soft body. Why did such a specialized predator vanish? As with many Carboniferous giants, shifting oxygen levels likely played a role. Its feeding strategy may also have been vulnerable to ecosystem change. As amphibians and reptiles diversified, soft-bodied prey became less dominant, replaced by more armored insects that could withstand its needle jaws. The specialization that once gave it an edge may have become a weakness. Spilaptera, the leaf-like winged killer that wasn't what it seemed. In the Carboniferous woods, where lots of plants made a jumble of shadows and mimicry was common, Spilaptera was one of the best at hiding. At first glance, this bug might have seemed innocent or even weak. Its wings were shaped and patterned to look like leaves moving in the swamp air. But Spilaptera's beauty was a lie. Its soft camouflage hid a stiff body and strong jaws. So it wasn't a prey species hiding from predators, but a hunter species hiding from its prey. Fossils of Spilaptera reveal broad, leaf-like wings with intricate venation. These patterns weren't random. In life, they likely resembled the texture and outline of the giant ferns and horsetails that dominated Carboniferous landscapes. This camouflage would have allowed Spilaptera to perch motionless among the greenery, completely overlooked by both predators and prey. In a forest where survival often depended on sight, this adaptation was its greatest weapon. Unlike Meganeura, which announced its presence with a thunder of wings, Spilaptera's strategy was silence and deception. But when the moment came to strike, Spilaptera was no passive leaf mimic. Its body structure suggests strong, rigid mandibles designed to crunch through exoskeletons. These jaws weren't built for sipping plant fluids or nectar. They were built for destruction. Prey that mistook it for a harmless leaf would suddenly be seized and torn apart, the disguise dropping in an instant. This is why paleontologists describe Spilaptera as a paradox, an insect that looked fragile but attacked with the strength of a predator. Its rigid body further supported this role. Unlike softer-bodied mimics that rely only on deception for defense, Spilaptera had a sturdier exoskeleton, giving it resilience in fights. If prey struggled, or if a predator attempted to test it, the insect was not defenseless. This dual strategy, camouflage combined with physical strength, made it especially effective in the highly competitive Carboniferous ecosystem. What made Spilaptera's mimicry so advanced was its placement in the evolutionary timeline. Most leaf mimics we know today, like katydids and stick insects, evolved tens of millions of years later. Yet here, in the Carboniferous, Spilaptera was already pioneering the tactic. This suggests that visual deception emerged much earlier in insect history than once thought. To small creatures navigating the fern forests, every leaf could be a potential predator. And Spilaptera exploited that fear perfectly. Its hunting grounds were likely the understory and mid-canopy layers of the swamp forest. By resting flat on broad leaves or vertical plant stalks, Spilaptera could blend seamlessly into the background. Smaller insects passing by, early mayflies, cockroaches, or juvenile orthopterans, would never suspect danger until jaws clamped shut. This meant that unlike Meganeura or Nemura typus, which needed active pursuit, Spilaptera could conserve energy, relying entirely on ambush. In a world with fluctuating resources, efficiency was a survival strategy in itself. The evolutionary success of Spilaptera's tactics can be measured by their recurrence in later insect lineages. Its design foreshadowed entire families of ambush predators that would rise long after the Carboniferous giants were gone. What is striking, however, is that in Spilaptera, mimicry was not a shield against predation. It was a sword disguised as a shield. It turned an evolutionary defense into a tool of attack, flipping expectations in a way that few other insects have managed. One may visualize how creepily quiet a swamp area would be at dusk, with only the soft rustling of leaves and the croaking of frogs far away. Spilaptera sat still on one of those leaves and waited for the slight trembling of a bug nearby. The image broke in a flash, and the victim was no longer there. In the Carboniferous, early living things were afraid to trust the environment because leaves in the forest could have teeth. Homoioptera, the jungle striker with saw-blade limbs. Already, the Carboniferous swamps were full of huge bugs like dragonflies that were as big as hawks, roaches that were as big as rats, and spiny wasps that were built like tanks. That being said, Homoioptera might have been one of the weirdest and most dangerous. Homoioptera was a fighter, not like the sleek birds or sneaky mimics of its time. It had 6 wings instead of the usual 4 that most insects have, and its legs were sharp and looked like saw blades with serrations. Because Homoioptera didn't just kill for food, living near it was always dangerous. Its strange weapons make me think it may have fought brutally against other creatures of the same kind. The 6-winged design is what first grabs attention. Most Carboniferous insects had either 2 or 4 functional wings, but Homoioptera's fossils show 3 pairs. Why so many? One possibility is agility. With 6 wings, it may have had the ability to hover, dart, and maneuver with far greater control than its rivals. Another theory is intimidation. Imagine an insect unfurling not just 4 but 6 veined, shimmering wings in the dim swamp light, a display that could frighten smaller creatures or confuse predators. Whatever the exact purpose, its wing structure set it apart from almost anything else alive at the time. The real horror, however, was in its limbs. The legs of Homoioptera were lined with saw-like ridges, some shaped almost like jagged blades. These weren't delicate features for climbing plants, they were weapons. Paleontologists believe the insect may have used them in multiple ways, shredding prey caught in its grasp, fending off attackers, or even battling others of its own species in violent struggles for territory or mates. Unlike predators that dispatched prey quickly, Homoioptera may have inflicted slow, tearing damage with every movement of its spined legs. Its hunting style likely combined ambush and brute force. Perching on vegetation, it could lunge at passing insects, catching them in a vice of jagged limbs. The saw-blade legs would lock in, grinding and cutting as the prey struggled. Once immobilized, its mandibles, also sharp and serrated, finished the kill. This double layer of weaponry made it an apex predator in its size class. Even heavily armored cockroach-like insects would have struggled against its slicing limbs. The possibility of intraspecific combat fighting between members of the same species adds an even darker edge to Homoeoptera. Insects today like stag beetles and mantises use exaggerated limbs for mating battles, sometimes killing rivals in the process. Homoeoptera's serrated legs may have served a similar function. If so, the swamps may have echoed not just with the quiet hum of wings, but with the violent scrapes and clashes of jagged limbs tearing against the exoskeleton. For smaller animals nearby, stumbling upon two of these creatures, locked in combat, would have been as dangerous as encountering a predator. Questions about energy needs are also raised by its six-winged shape. It would have taken a lot of power for a bug to keep six wings up in the air. This makes it seem like Homoeoptera didn't fly far like Meganeura did. Instead of flying over large areas, it may have relied on short, strong bursts of flight, moving from perch to perch. To put it another way, it was a strike fighter, fast, powerful, and terrible up close. The Carboniferous was an arms race, and Homoeoptera represents one of its most extreme experiments. Where Meganeura grew larger and Namarotypus evolved needle jaws, Homoeoptera doubled down on physical combat, turning its very limbs into weapons. The fact that no insect alive today carries such exaggerated features shows just how unique this evolutionary path was. It was a specialist of its time, and when ecosystems shifted, its brutal adaptations may have become obsolete. Paulida, the wingless crawlers with hooks and horns. It wasn't always bad dreams about the Carboniferous sky that had wings. There were other scary things on the ground and in the bushes, while Meganeura, Mazathyros and their relatives ruled the air. The Paulida were one of them. They were an old group of insects that didn't have wings, and instead used armor, spines and dangerous headgear to stay alive. These primitive crawlers were the roughnecks of the swamp floor. They were hunters and scavengers that moved slowly and used both brute force and scary weapons. Unlike most Carboniferous insects, which flaunted enormous wings to take advantage of oxygen-rich skies, Paulida abandoned flight entirely. Their bodies were compact and heavily built, designed for crawling under rotting vegetation, navigating roots, and burrowing through decaying wood. Fossils show sturdy exoskeletons, often reinforced with spines or ridges, giving them the appearance of miniature tanks. Instead of speed or aerial agility, they relied on toughness and close-range combat. Their most distinctive features were the hooks and horns on their heads and thoraxes. Some species bore forward-pointing spines, like natural lances. Others had horn-like projections jutting from their armored plates. These could have served multiple purposes: intimidating predators, dueling rivals, or even grappling with prey. The hooked structures in particular suggest an ambush strategy, grabbing onto passing insects or worms, pinning them down and delivering crushing bites. With powerful mandibles to match, Paulida turned the forest floor into a gauntlet of traps. These adaptations may also have allowed them to burrow into other creatures. Some paleontologists speculate that certain Paulida species were opportunistic parasites or predators that attacked softer-bodied insects by clamping down with hooks and cutting into them with jaws. In an environment filled with soft larvae, early nymphs and worms, such a strategy would have been devastatingly effective. Victims caught in their grip would have been shredded before they had any chance of escape. Unlike the aerial giants, Paulida didn't need to chase their meals. They thrived in the shadows, scavenging carcasses or preying on creatures already weakened by the swamp's brutal conditions. Their armored bodies allowed them to take risks other insects couldn't, crawling into tight spaces filled with competitors, even fighting among themselves over food. Fossil evidence suggests they may have lived in groups, or at least crowded the same habitats, turning logs and swamp detritus into miniature battlefields. This grounded lifestyle also shielded them from one of the Carboniferous' greatest threats, the weather. Heavy rains and violent storms often grounded winged insects like Meganeura, but Paulida were unaffected. Crawling among roots and damp soil, they could remain active even when aerial predators were forced to perch. This gave them access to prey during times when the skies were less dangerous, but the ground was still teeming with life. Paulida also makes a reference to the wide range of genetic studies that are going on at the moment. While some insects worked on flying better, others worked on fighting on the ground better. Their protected bodies without wings may have been an early step toward the roach-like survivors that would rule later times. The Paulida were not just inactive hunters, though. Their hooks, horns, and mouths show that they were involved in the Carboniferous arms race. It's distressing to think about them in their natural surroundings. Think about being a small animal walking across the swamp floor. The bushes look safer than the sky, where huge dragonflies watch out. But spiny bodies move under the wet trash. As protected bugs scurry forward, hooks sparkle in the dark. All of a sudden, one jumps at you, grabbing you with its sharp limbs and pulling you into the dark. In a world where the ground was just as dangerous as the air, this was how many small animals lived. Gerarus, the barbed-backed bug with knife shoulders. If the Carboniferous woods were a race to build weapons, Gerarus was a living armory. In contrast to the flying giants that ruled the skies, Gerarus carried its danger on its back. Fossils show an insect that was about 2 inches long and had spines all over its body, some of which stuck out like knives from its shoulders. These spikes weren't just for looks, they were weapons. During a time when everything was trying to hunt, crawl, or swarm, Gerarus made its body into a castle full of sharp blades. Gerarus's spiny thorax protection is the thing that stands out the most. Paleontologists who study its remains say that its backplate, or pronotum, was wide and shield-shaped, and it was covered with stiff spines. It's likely that these protrusions had more than one purpose. The spines acted as defenses against animals that liked to eat them, like frogs or bigger insects. It would have been painful or even fatal to try to swallow Gerarus. Its sharp shape would have made it hard for a predator to hold in its mouth, even if it had been caught. This was a simple but terribly effective way for a small insect to stay alive. Make yourself so unpleasant to eat that predators will look elsewhere. But Gerarus wasn't purely defensive. The placement of its spines, especially the long blade-like ones near the shoulders, suggests they may have been used offensively as well. Imagine 2 of these insects colliding in swarm combat, spines raking against soft exoskeletons, slicing rivals open in the chaos. Just as modern beetles clash with horns or mantises grapple with spiny arms, Gerarus likely fought its battles with the jagged weapons built into its body. This meant the Carboniferous underbrush could erupt into skirmishes, where dozens of armored bugs slashed and shoved one another, turning the forest floor into a living battlefield. Its body plan hints at a versatile lifestyle. Gerarus had wings, but they weren't designed for long-distance soaring like Meganeuras. Instead, they were probably used for short bursts, hopping from one patch of swamp vegetation to another, or escaping sudden danger. Most of its time was likely spent crawling, probing for food, and defending territory. Its mouthparts suggest an omnivorous diet, capable of scavenging plant matter, but also equipped with mandibles strong enough to chew through softer-bodied insects. This adaptability would have allowed it to exploit a wide range of resources, thriving even in crowded environments. The presence of spines also may have played a role in mate selection. In modern insects, exaggerated features like horns or spikes often double as sexual displays. The largest, sharpest-spined Gerarus individuals may have intimidated rivals and attracted mates, ensuring their genes carried forward. If so, the Carboniferous swamps may have witnessed spiny showdowns, where males bristled and pushed, their knife-like shoulders clashing in violent contests for dominance. Meeting Gerarus, on the other hand, was a nightmare for smaller animals. Think about being an insect with a soft body that is moving along a fern stalk and running into a shape that is armored and covered in barbs. You would hurt yourself more than Gerarus if you tried to bite or hit back because of the spines. If early frogs were looking for a quick snack, a mouthful of spines might have hurt them badly enough that they wouldn't try again. In the Carboniferous, it was often easy to find food, but Gerarus made sure it wasn't that way. Its fossil record, preserved in coal-rich deposits, paints a picture of a successful survivor. Gerarus lived millions of years across different parts of the Carboniferous, adapting to various swamp environments. Its defensive-offensive mix proved robust, but like many insect giants and specialists, it eventually disappeared as ecosystems shifted in the Permian. Falling oxygen levels, new predators, and competition likely ended its reign. Yet, its evolutionary experiment, turning the body itself into a weapon, is echoed in countless modern insects, from spiny stick bugs to beetles with horned armor. Lobeatid grasshoppers, jumping razors of the canopy. Lobeatid grasshoppers lived high in the Carboniferous woods, where huge horsetails and ferns reached for the sky. They were related to crickets and katydids, but were much bigger than those insects, and they learned how to jump like a weapon. These days, grasshoppers mostly eat plants, but in the Carboniferous period, their ancestors were much darker. Lobeatids had strong jaws and legs that were strengthened, which suggests they weren't just nibbling on leaves. They were also good at ambushes, and could jump with explosive force on prey that wasn't expecting it. The most frightening characteristic about lobeatids was their mouths. These were not the simple teeth that grasshoppers have today that are used for grinding. They were wider and sharper, and they were made to cut through both skin and chitin. According to paleontologists who study their mouth parts, they ate both plants and smaller animals. In the Carboniferous jungle, there was a lot of food and a lot of competition, so being able to eat anything was a big plus. If a smaller bug got in the way of a hungry lobeatid, it would be crushed by large jaws that could turn it into food in seconds. Their legs, however, were what made them truly nightmarish. Modern grasshoppers use their hind legs to leap several times their body length, but lobeatids were larger, stronger, and operating in an oxygen-rich atmosphere that fueled greater muscle power. They could launch themselves from canopy branches with frightening speed, closing the distance on prey in an instant. Imagine an insect nearly the size of a modern sparrow dropping from above, claws outstretched, jaws ready. This was not the harmless chirping of modern crickets, but an aerial assault from above. The canopy environment gave them ample opportunities. Dense vegetation provided both cover and launching platforms. Prey moving along fern leaves or clambering up stalks would have been easy targets. The lobeatid's camouflage made them look like part of the foliage until it was too late. In a sudden burst of movement, they could strike from angles other predators couldn't manage. Unlike Meganeura, which required open space to swoop in, lobeatids could attack in the cramped, tangled canopy where maneuverability mattered most. Fossil evidence shows that some lobeatids had broad, leaf-like wings that may have doubled as camouflage. These wings likely played a supporting role, allowing them to glide short distances after a leap or to stabilize themselves during a strike. Their hunting style may have resembled a cross between modern grasshoppers and predatory mantises: leap, grab, bite, and consume. The combination of speed, stealth, and jaw power made them a nightmare for smaller insects trying to survive in the treetops. Their presence also shaped the canopy ecosystem. Prey species had to evolve strategies to avoid becoming a grasshopper's meal. Some developed tougher exoskeletons. Others adapted nocturnal habits to avoid diurnal hunters. This predator-prey dynamic drove diversification, pushing the Carboniferous insect world into ever more bizarre evolutionary arms races. The lobeatids, with their versatile diet and devastating leap, stood at the center of this contest. Not all lobeatids may have been strict predators. Some were likely opportunistic, scavenging on carcasses or feeding on both plant and animal matter depending on availability. This flexibility would have helped them thrive in an environment that was constantly changing, where oxygen levels, humidity, and vegetation density fluctuated with climate shifts. Yet, even as generalists, their predatory capabilities meant they could never be dismissed as harmless. Lobeatids were menacing things that waited above for the smaller animals in the forest. It wasn't always the wind when the leaves moved. It could be the sign of a grasshopper that is hunched over and ready to jump. Once it was in the air, its weight and speed would have been enough to knock out its opponent, and the jaws that followed would have quickly ended the fight. This was a brute force ambush, not Meganeura's elegant aerial hunts. It was simple, brutal, and effective. Delitzschala, the delicate-looking assassin with hidden power. At first glance, Delitzschala might not have looked like a threat. It had thin wings with fine veins that looked like the wings of current lacewings. Someone in the Carboniferous swamp would have seen it and thought it looked flimsy and almost like a piece of art floating through the humid air. However, this was a lie. Even though Delitzschala looked soft, it had weapons that made it a dangerous assassin of the canopy. Its hooked claws and sharp piercing mouthparts made it look like a predator. Discovered in Germany in coal deposits, Delitzschala is often cited as one of the earliest true winged insects. Its lace-like wings are preserved in exquisite detail, showing intricate venation that gave them both strength and flexibility. These wings would have allowed it to maneuver precisely among dense vegetation, making it an agile flyer in an environment where predators and prey lurked at every level. But while many early insects with similar wings were plant feeders or nectar drinkers, Delitzschala's mouthparts tell a darker story. Instead of simple chewing mandibles, Delitzschala possessed elongated, narrow jaws capable of piercing. Combined with its hooked claws, this gave it the ability to grab and hold smaller insects, stabbing into them to feed. Modern lacewings hunt aphids and soft-bodied insects in exactly this way, and Delitzschala appears to have pioneered this strategy millions of years earlier. For unsuspecting prey crawling along ferns or hovering in the air, this delicate insect was a sudden executioner. Another thing that made it unique was its claws. Fossils show that animals had limbs with bent hooks on the ends that could grip things. These weren't made to stick to flowers or drink juice. They were made to hold their prey in place. If a smaller bug got too close to what looked like an innocent winged shape, Delitzschala's claws would snap shut in an instant, pulling the bug toward its sharp jaws. Once those hooks got a hold, it was almost impossible to get away. What made Delitzschala particularly dangerous was its ability to blend in. Unlike the spiny bulk of Bohemia tupus or the jagged frame of Geraris, Delitzschala didn't announce itself as a threat. Its appearance suggested fragility, which may have lulled prey into ignoring it. Camouflage in the Carboniferous didn't always mean looking like plants. Sometimes it meant simply looking harmless. This evolutionary disguise turned Delitzschala into an overlooked assassin, killing quietly while more obvious predators dominated attention. Its ecological role may have been to regulate populations of smaller, soft-bodied insects that flourished in the swamp forests. With so many plant-feeding insects competing for resources, predators like Delitzschala would have been crucial in preventing population explosions. In turn, this balance would have made it easier for larger predators like Meganeura to focus on larger prey. In this way, Delitzschala was a small but vital cog in the Carboniferous food web. A quiet regulator with lethal efficiency. Its wings, while delicate-looking, were not weak. The venation patterns suggest they could withstand rapid flapping and sudden maneuvers. This agility would have allowed Delitzschala to weave between stalks of horsetails and branches of giant ferns, darting in and out of cover with precision. Unlike the lumbering flight of some larger insects, Delitzschala likely relied on speed and quick reflexes. Combined with its silent approach, it was well suited for ambush, depicting Delitzschala at work, and you'll see a contradiction come to life. A bug that is as graceful as a butterfly, but as mean as a mantis. A very small shadow moves closer, its wings sparkling like glass in the mixed light. Then, out of the blue, hooked claws snap forward and pin a person against the bark. It has a thin frame that bends, and its jaws are sharp and go deep. Beautiful things quickly turned scary for the prey. Tupus, the broad-headed biter with heavy armor. Delitzschala was the silent killer of the Carboniferous forest, and Tupus was the wild animal that lived in the swamps. The most noticeable thing about it was its broad, flattened head that was shaped like a shield and had ridges that made it look like a primitive charging ram. Together with a thicker exoskeleton, this made Tupus look like a bug made of armor. But its body did more than protect it. It also helped it break, push, and bite its way through the thick, dangerous woods. Fossil evidence shows that Tupus's skull and body were unusually wide compared to other insects of its time. This design was not delicate or aerodynamic. Instead, it was built for impact. The broad head could have been used to shove rivals aside, press down struggling prey, or wedge into tight crevices to root out hidden animals. Its jaws were just as intimidating. Wide, crushing mandibles capable of grinding through both plant tissue and the softer parts of other insects. Unlike specialized predators that targeted only one type of prey, Tupus was likely a generalist, able to feed on fungi, rotting wood, scavenged carcasses, or live victims caught in its grip. Its armor reinforced this brutal lifestyle. The ridged plates covering its back and sides would have made it extremely difficult to injure. Amphibians trying to bite through its shell may have failed, while other insects attempting to pierce it with spines or jaws would have found their attacks deflected. This resilience gave Tupus the confidence to enter hostile environments. Rotten logs, dense underbrush, and even areas swarming with other aggressive insects. It wasn't just a predator, it was a survivor, able to outlast attacks and turn its heavy body into an advantage. The Carboniferous forests were full of cluttered terrain, fallen trees, swampy mud, and mats of tangled roots. In such environments, flight wasn't always the best option. Unlike Meganeura, which patrolled open skies, Tupus's compact, armored design made it perfect for ground-level combat and ambush. It likely prowled the forest floor or crawled through rotting vegetation, using its broad head to push into narrow hiding spots. Prey that thought it was safe deep in bark or soil may have found Tupus forcing its way in, its crushing jaws waiting on the other side. A predator and a scavenger, it may have had two roles in the environment. Like many insects that have thick shells today, Tupus probably wasn't picky. In the absence of live food, it could chew on dead animals that other predators had left behind, or scrape fungus off of decaying plants. The fact that it could eat anything meant that it could do well even when food was short. That being said, it was ready to fight whenever the chance came up, using its battering ram head to hurt people and its jaws to kill them. Its heavy build may have come with trade-offs. Flight for Tupus was likely awkward and limited. Its broad head and armor would have made long-distance aerial hunting inefficient. Instead, it probably relied on crawling, climbing, and short bursts of flight. This suggests a lifestyle closer to modern beetles than to dragonflies, deliberate, powerful, and opportunistic, rather than swift and sleek. The broad head may also have been used in mating combat. Modern beetles, like rhinoceros beetles and stag beetles, use horns and mandibles to battle for dominance, and Tupus may have done something similar with its flattened skull. Two males slamming their broad heads together in a prehistoric shoving match would have been a common sight in the Carboniferous swamps. The winner not only secured territory, but also access to mates, ensuring the spread of its heavy armored genes. Tupus is deadly not only because of its weapons, but also because it doesn't give up. This was not a predator that was fast or sneaky. It was made to last and to push, crush, and bite its way to life. In a world full of giants, Tupus showed that being tough could be just as useful as having wings or being fast. Anything in its way could not get away from the pressure of its metal and the crunch of its jaws. Orthoptera-like predators, the early katydid killers. Today, when we think of katydids, crickets, or grasshoppers, we think of leaf chewers making noise in the woods. But during the Carboniferous, their ancestors were not at all like that. These predators that looked like Orthoptera were not inactive plant eaters. Instead, they had long, spiny legs and jaws that overlapped. Their jaws were sharp enough to crush soft-bodied food, and they liked to hide in thick vegetation to hunt. The world was already ruled by huge dragonflies and creepy wasps, but these proto-katydids brought the scary down to earth. Their jaws were the most unsettling feature. Unlike the grinding mandibles of modern grasshoppers, these insects evolved jaws that overlapped like scissors, giving them a shearing motion rather than a simple crush. This made them efficient predators, able to slice apart smaller arthropods with precision. In a swamp teeming with cockroach-like bugs, larvae, and juvenile insects, this cutting bite turned them into specialists at dispatching anything unlucky enough to cross their path. They were not passive grazers, but active hunters, the earliest katydid killers. The spiny legs reinforced their predatory lifestyle. Fossils suggest they carried long hind limbs with jagged ridges and thorn-like projections. Modern predatory orthopterans use spines to trap and pin prey, and these early hunters likely did the same. A strike from their legs could ensnare an insect, holding it long enough for the jaws to finish the job. This combination of trapping limbs and slicing mouthparts made them versatile killers, equally capable of ambushing from concealment or wrestling down struggling victims. The Carboniferous undergrowth was the perfect stage for their hunting style. Unlike aerial predators that required open space, orthoptera-like hunters thrived in tangled vegetation. Imagine the forest floor covered in towering club mosses and horsetails, with thick mats of decaying matter underneath. This environment created countless choke points and hiding spots ideal for ambush. These predators could crouch motionless, blending into stems or leaves, until prey stumbled too close. Then, in a sudden burst, spiny legs snapped forward, jaws sliced downward, and another victim was gone. Their predatory adaptations likely also shaped their social behavior. Many early orthopterans are believed to have been solitary, avoiding direct competition with their own kind. But encounters may have been violent when they did occur. The same jaws and legs that dispatched prey could have been turned against rivals, making the Carboniferous underbrush a constant arena of small but deadly duels. What's appealing about these bugs is that they show how diverse orthopterans were in the past. There are a few bugs and katydids that eat meat, but most of them eat plants. But it's possible that their Carboniferous ancestors were more aggressive to begin with. It seems to show that the Orthoptera lineage tried a lot of different ways to eat before most species became experts at eating plants. The katydids we hear at night are related to insects that were killed with their sharp mouths and legs equipped with spikes. Their role in the ecosystem was crucial. By hunting soft-bodied insects and larvae, they helped regulate populations that might otherwise have exploded unchecked. At the same time, they provided food for larger predators like Meganeura or amphibians. In the balance of the Carboniferous food web, they were both predator and prey, bridging the gap between the giants of the sky and the smallest creatures of the soil. Paleodictyoptera, the five-limbed flyers with piercing tubes. Though there were many bugs in the Carboniferous, the Paleodictyoptera were by far the strangest. These were some of the first big insect groups, and their bodies were built differently than those of living things today. They were much bigger than most other birds of prey of their time, with wings that were more than a foot long. But it wasn't just their size that scared people. It was also the way their faces were shaped. They had 5 sets of wings, 4 pairs of working wings, and an extra set of small winglets on their chests. And the parts of their mouths changed into sharp tubes that they could use to pierce plants, or maybe even other insects, and drain them like a needle. In the Carboniferous swamp world, Paleodictyoptera were seen as vampires on the water with too many wings. The additional winglets are one of their most puzzling traits. Fossil evidence shows that in addition to the forewings and hindwings, these insects possessed smaller, rigid projections on the thorax that resembled reduced wings. These weren't used for flight, but may have served as stabilizers or even display features. When Paleodictyoptera spread its wings, the combined effect would have been immense. A broad, alien-looking profile unlike any modern insect. For rivals or predators, this display could have been intimidating, making the insect appear larger and more dangerous than it actually was. The real nightmare, however, was in their beak-like proboscis. Many Paleodictyoptera carried elongated mouthparts shaped like tubes, often lined with ridges or stylets. While some researchers suggest these were adapted for sucking plant fluids, piercing into ferns or horsetails, Others argue they may also have been opportunistic predators. The structure could easily have been used to puncture the soft bodies of other insects, draining them much like modern assassin bugs or vampire wasps do today. In an ecosystem brimming with larvae, nymphs, and soft-bodied prey, such a strategy would have been highly effective. Their sheer size made them imposing. Wingspans up to 12 inches meant they were visible from a distance, gliding between swamp trees like oversized moths. For smaller insects, the shadow of a Paleodictyopteran passing overhead could mean death, especially if the giant landed nearby and deployed its piercing beak. While Meganeura relied on fast mid-air strikes, these five-limbed flyers may have taken a slower but equally deadly approach, settling onto plants, waiting patiently, and then stabbing anything that came within reach. It was amazing how different this group was. Many different species have been found in fossils from Europe, North America, and Asia. Some of them had brightly colored wings that they may have used to hide or warn others. Others were less fancy and seemed to value stealth over showmanship. But they all had the same scary features: bodies that were too big, extra limbs, and lips that looked like tubes. They were a huge experiment in evolution that saw what bugs could change into in an oxygen-rich environment, where there were no vertebrate flyers to fight with them. Their place in the Carboniferous food web was likely significant. By piercing plants, they may have been among the first insects to exploit vascular tissue, opening the evolutionary door for future sap-feeding lineages like aphids and cicadas. If they also targeted animals, then they were dual-threat predators, draining both flora and fauna. Either way, their feeding would have shaped the balance of swamp ecosystems, redistributing nutrients and influencing the survival strategies of prey. Xenoneura, the jagged-winged ambusher with blade mandibles. In the forests of the Carboniferous period, not all wings were smooth sails for flying. Some, like Xenoneura's, had sharp saw-like cuts along the edges that made them look less like wings and more like weapons. Fossil records show that this insect had wings with lines that didn't look natural, unlike other insects of the same time that had wings with rounded or veined patterns. With its large blade-shaped jaws, Xenoneura was a predator that was meant to hide and attack. It used both its wings and jaws in ways that no modern insect can quite match. The serrated edges of its wings raise fascinating questions. While most wings functioned purely for flight, Xenoneura's wing fossils suggest they may have doubled as cutting tools. Some paleontologists propose that the jagged edges could have helped slice through dense vegetation, allowing the insect to move stealthily through the undergrowth, where smoother winged rivals struggled. Others go further, suggesting that the wings themselves may have been used as intimidation displays, spreading open to reveal a spiked silhouette that warned off would-be attackers. In either case, Xenoneura turned its wings into more than simple flight structures. They were part of its hunting toolkit. The jaws of Xenoneura were equally unsettling. Long, narrow, and sharp, they resembled blades rather than crushing mandibles. These jaws were ideal for disabling prey quickly, perhaps snapping through legs or piercing soft bodies with precision. In contrast to the needle-like piercing of Namura-typus, Xenoneura's bite would have been a clean, slicing attack, leaving victims unable to move long enough for the insect to consume them. In the dense swamp, where creatures often relied on concealment, this ambush strike was particularly effective. Its lifestyle likely combined stealth with sudden violence. Unlike Meganeura, which dominated the open skies, Xenoneura probably hunted in the lower canopy or understory. There, its jagged wings blended into the serrated outlines of fern leaves and horsetail stalks. Motionless, it could wait for smaller insects to approach, appearing like nothing more than another leaf edge. Then, with a sudden burst of wing beats, it would strike, jaws cutting down prey before they even realized they were under attack. Its body design shows the importance of deception, camouflage paired with devastating ambush power. The jagged wings may also have provided structural reinforcement. Their serrated design could have stiffened the wing's edge, reducing tears when moving through tight vegetation. This would have been an advantage in the cluttered swamps, where smooth wings could snag or rip. By evolving a jagged profile, Xenonura may have traded elegance for durability, an adaptation that gave it freedom to hunt where others avoided. In an ecosystem where every corner hid predators, being able to dominate the thick foliage was a unique advantage. The presence of blade mandibles and jagged wings also suggests possible intraspecific combat. Just as Gerarus likely used its spines in fights with rivals, Xenonura may have spread its wings and slashed with jaws during territorial disputes. Two individuals facing off in the swamp canopy would have been a terrifying sight. Wings flared like serrated shields, mandibles snapping as they grappled. For smaller insects nearby, stumbling into such a duel would have been as dangerous as encountering a predator. What's really interesting about Xenonura is how strange it must have looked compared to current bugs. Today's predators have sharp legs or mouths that can pierce through things, but Xenonura paired changes to its wings with jaws that looked like blades in a way that no other insect lineage has done. It was an experiment in evolution to make almost every part of the body into a weapon. It was a live reminder that the Carboniferous was a place where monsters were designed. Archimelacriss, the armored roach that ate everything. Most people think of the small, sneaky bugs that live in modern kitchens when they hear the word cockroach. But in the Carboniferous woods, cockroach ancestors were facing a much stronger enemy. Archimelacriss was one of the first insects that really looked like roaches. It was up to 6 inches long and was shaped like a small tank. With its thick armor plates, shield-like head, and crushing jaws, it was able to eat almost anything, including plants, fungus, dead animals, and even bugs that had just been killed. Archimelacriss was one of the most successful and scary survivors of its time because it could change and adapt. Its body plan was unmistakably roach-like. A wide, flattened head sat beneath a hardened shield called a pronotum, protecting it from above. Its exoskeleton was thicker than most insects of its size, giving it durability against predators and rivals. Fossil evidence suggests its legs were strong and spiny, designed for both rapid crawling and shoving through leaf litter. Unlike the lightweight frames of dragonflies or lacewings, Archimelacriss was heavy, armored, and stubbornly resilient, the kind of insect that wouldn't die easily. Its jaws were its greatest asset. Unlike predators such as Meganura, which used serrated mandibles to tear flesh, Archimelacriss had broad, crushing jaws capable of grinding down nearly anything organic. Fungal mats, rotting wood, decaying carcasses, or live insects, all could be processed by its powerful bite. This made it not only a scavenger, but also a predator when the opportunity arose. Smaller insects or larvae caught in its path would be chewed apart without mercy. In the Carboniferous world, where competition for resources was fierce, this eat-everything strategy ensured survival. Archimelacriss thrived in the swampy underbrush. The Carboniferous forest floor was a chaotic tangle of decaying plant matter, fungi, and insect carcasses, a buffet for a creature with no dietary limits. It likely played an important role as a decomposer, recycling nutrients by feeding on waste and decay. But unlike modern cockroaches, which usually avoid open combat, Archimelacriss had the tools to be aggressive. Its size and armor meant it could fight smaller predators and even challenge other scavengers for food. This made it both a recycler of the forest and a competitor that weaker creatures learned to avoid. Its resilience made it one of the true success stories of the Carboniferous. While specialized predators like Nemurotypus or Sinuijumantispa relied on particular strategies, Archimelacriss relied on versatility. If prey was scarce, it ate plants. If plants were scarce, it ate fungus. If fungus was gone, it turned to scavenging. And if something smaller crossed its path, it became a predator. This ability to adapt to whatever food was available explains why cockroach lineages survived multiple mass extinctions, outlasting giants that seemed far more powerful. Archimelacriss wasn't just a slow crawler, though. Fossil marks show that it had wings that were folded up neatly under its armor. Even though they weren't made for graceful soaring, these wings probably let them fly for short periods of time, long enough to get away from enemies or move when food sources ran out. With its armor and teeth that could eat anything, it was almost the perfect survivor. It could move around easily, stay safe, and thrive on almost anything. If you picture Carboniferous in real life, you'll see the perfect mix of scavenger and predator. A 6-inch armored bug crawling through wet plants, its antennae sweeping ahead as it rips apart a clump of fungi with its teeth. It then charges at a smaller bug, pinning it down with its spiny legs and eating it up. If a bigger predator tried to attack, its heavy armor and protected head made it hard to hurt, and its wings let it get away in a pinch. The Carboniferous animals never felt safe on the forest floor as long as Carboniferous was nearby. The Carboniferous wasn't just an age of giant plants and endless swamps. It was a time when insects became monsters, ruling land, sky, and shadows with claws, spikes, and wings sharper than steel. Though they vanished with the fall of oxygen-rich skies, their fossils remind us of a world far stranger and far more dangerous than our own. If you enjoyed this journey into deep prehistory, make sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment on which Carboniferous nightmare shocked you the most. And don't miss our next dive into the forgotten horrors of Earth's past.